Welcome to the March 21st, 2025 meeting of the San Jose branch of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. We are here to discuss and to learn about abolishing corporate personhood. But before we do that, we always open our meetings with the Raging Grannies. There's a group moved to amend, and here is what they preach. Corporate personhood must end, and money's not free speech. And the legal meaning of just who has rights has so been so blurred. An amendment is what we must do to redefine these words. For all our causes to succeed, we have to fix this flaw. It's the only way to end the greed and make our dreams the law. So that just proves that you don't have to be perfect to lead, okay?
My country has been sold to those with corporate gold. It's them I fear. With our elections stacked, our civil rights attacked, and corporate written laws a fact, their path is clear. They balk at climate rules while pushing fossil fuels that rape our land. They miss the Gilded Age with workers in a cage, inciting then ignoring rage. Let us take a stand. Our freedom needs us all. Answer its desperate call. Get out and vote. Tell them that we're awake. We know just what's at stake. We may bend, but we won't break. Oligarchs, take note. My
You
country has been sold to those with corporate gold. They deal in lies. I'll vote for those who'll fight to save our sacred rights. Democracy's our guiding light. We won't let it die.
Well, here we go. We're going to start and let me introduce Jennie Spanos. Now, I heard Jennie on a national Move to Amend webinar
You
about 2 weeks ago, and I was really impressed. And I wanted to share it with everyone in WILF because there is a connection. And that connection is maybe 2 decades ago, WILF in Humboldt did a big project on corporate personhood. And actually, our own Lois Fiedler ran a little workshop on that several of us attended. And I somewhere up here I have my books from that. And so I'm really eager to hear from Jennie, and let me please help me welcome Jennie to WILF San Jose. Jennie, and you'll just need to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me. And I just want to say I love Raging Grannies. You are so badass. Um, Excuse my French, but it's truth. I've had the pleasure of um, rallying, protesting, marching, demanding justice with the Raging Grannies for across the nation. And it's just an honor to be in the room with them and the Women's International League of Peace and Freedom, you know, just uh, all kinds of work after my own heart. So, and just honored to be here with y'all. There's also other connections that y'all may not know, but we have what we call a corporate constitutional rights timeline, and it's a timeline that was created um, to kind of give the history. Well, I'll get into it more as we go into it, but just know that Jan Edwards from Women's International League of Peace and Freedom helped make that. She was the principal in putting it together. And she was also a principal in our, I'd say, the ancestor or the elder of our organization at Move to Amend, which is a PROCLAD, Program on Law and Corporations, who did a lot of the deep work that needed to be done to understand what corporate constitutional rights are, and money is free speech. So just wanted to bring that to y'all's attention. That history between Move to Amend and WILF is longstanding. We're not a very old organization. We started shortly after Citizens United, but since our founder, WILF has been instrumental in the work that we do. So I just want to point that out. So as y'all know, we could have the people or we can have corporate rule, and it's up to us to build that authentic democracy that we know that we've never really had in this country, right? It was only meant for a small segment of the population. So it's a real honor to be here and talk to the organization about the work that we do. As you know, we are facing an existential threat. Rising authoritarianism, fascism is, that coupling between corporate power and our government. And we're seeing what we call it Move to Amend, a corporate coup that's in process. And we knew it was coming, right, after Citizens United. A quick agenda, we're going to talk about who we are as Move to Amend, how corporations and the super rich have hijacked the legal authority to self-governance. We're going to show examples of affecting the peace and freedom and human rights, women's rights and justice goals. And we're going to talk about forces for social justice and change and in democracy, which y'all know very much because that's the work that y'all do. And then we'll talk about the We the People Amendment, which is a proposed amendment to the Constitution to change all that, and why peace organizations really should support this wholly. And we're going to build and how we can work together in building that solidarity and collaboration and getting real social, economic, and environmental justice on the boards. So I'm going to try to go through this really quick because I want to have more discussion than slideshow, okay? But our mission at Move to Amend, we are a coalition of hundreds of organizations, hundreds of thousands of individuals that are committed to social, economic, environmental justice, ending corporate rule, and of course, building a vibrant democracy that's genuinely accountable to us, we the people, and not corporate interests. We have a couple of goals here that are really important to the movement building that we do. One is to pass the We the People Amendment. This amendment would make clear that artificial entities do not have corporate constitutional rights. If this is a new concept to you, then by the end of this discussion, you'll know what we mean by that, and that money is not free speech. We're also working to build a multinational, multi-ethnic, intergenerational, cross-class democracy movement. And also provoke discussion and organizing about how to make real the promise of democracy through constitutional renewal. So the Constitution versus people, democracy that we envision is that people, that we're free and sovereign because we hold all the political power. But we delegate some of that, right, to the power of government that should still be subordinate and accountable to we the people. We assign government duties, which discharge this in writing laws in the public interest. But no law can violate the private rights of individual citizens. So the reality, though, as we all know, that the Constitution was written as a property rights document. The human rights addition was an addition that some people demanded, right? Some of the founders demanded, but that wasn't what was the original intent of the Constitution. There was no definition of personhood, and the only one that it included was white male property owners. All the rest of us were not even considered human beings or a person. with personhood rights. So corporate personhood is the legal personhood, or the corporate personhood was established by English law. It was enshrined in U.S. state law. These are legal privileges to perform certain functions as a single entity. To hold property, to write contracts, to own property, sue and be sued, limited liability for shareholders, which is a privilege, again, not a right. And human personhood is that we're all born with inalienable rights as human beings. And human rights are enshrined in this Constitution as a statement of principles. And constitutional rights are restraint on the power of the government, or that's the intention, right? Prior to 1886, which was kind of birthed in your backyard, corporations they had a defined purpose. They had to have a benefit to the public. They were issued, the charters were issued for a limited time, and they were able to be revoked by the state or legislatures and courts. They were democratic tools, and they were prohibited from participating in the political process and or charities. That was short-lived, right? Now we have all of these constitutional rights that have been hijacked. The Supreme Court decisions have expanded corporate personhood to include protections under the First, the Fourth, the Fifth, the Sixth, the Seventh, and one that I think is especially egregious is the 14th Amendment. They use these constitutional rights to overturn locally enacted regulations and protection to influence legislators and votes, to write model legislations. I'm sure y'all are familiar with ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. That's a think tank boilerplate laws that extensively rob us of our constitutional rights, especially women and people of color, and hand them out wholesale to corporations. So, and as I said, one of the most egregious is the first one that was hijacked, right? The 14th Amendment. It was supposed to be the amendment that extended equal protection to our brothers and sisters that had formerly been enslaved, right? The main purpose of that amendment was equal protection. And I want to read this because I think it's important. The 13th, 14th, and 15th total in total was the freedom of the African race, right? It was to hand that to what should have been inalienable rights to begin with. And also the security and perpetration of that freedom and their protections from oppression of the white men who had formerly held them in slavery. Of the first 200 cases that were brought before the Supreme Court, 159 of them were business entities. 159. So as they used and hijacked this rights to cover, so let me back up. Santa Clara County, like I said, happened in your backyard. Santa Clara County versus the Southern Pacific Railroad. The court didn't even hear about the case. It was just a cliff note that was put in a head note in the decision that extended rights, equal protection rights to corporations, which of course is absolutely disgusting. And since then, over and over again, the Supreme Court continues to side with corporate entities over people. We saw that again in Buckley v. Vallejo. This was the first time that political spending was considered protected free speech. And then First National Bank of Boston and Bilotti was allowed for influencing or affecting voters' opinions as protected free speech. And then again in International Dairy Foods Association and in Amstoy, where corporations have negative free speech, they have the right not to speak. So this is like a blanket policy for corporations now, right? So Oil companies, for example, are allowed to remain silent about baking our planet or heating our, being instrumental in the fact that we are heating our planet, our atmosphere is heating up, and they have the right to remain silent on that, the right to not speak. What most of us, or the first time I personally had ever heard of corporate personhood was during the 2010 decision, Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission. And that's when they extended and expanded the notion that a corporation was a person and that its money was a form of free speech that could be given without limits in our election. To not be overdone, then Clutchin v. FEC allowed interest limited to quid pro quo. Since that time, the Supreme Court has also reinforced that notion that bribery is legal. And then in 2014, the Hobby Lobby case, I'm sure that most of y'all have heard about Hobby Lobby v. Burwell. These closely owned for-profit corporations are exempt from laws its owners religiously object to, i.e., providing health care for women. So we'll go through other examples of how corporate rule and corporate constitutional rights and big money in elections have negatively impacted every aspect of our lives. I wanted to share, it's a video one of our supporters put together recently, and I wanted to share this with you if you haven't had a chance to hear it. It's why we need the We the People Amendment.
The Supreme Court of the United States has decided that corporations have the same constitutional rights that we human citizens have. To get an idea of what this actually means, consider the following. The court has decided that corporations have the right, granted by the First Amendment, not to speak when they want to keep facts from us, such as what's in our food. For example, residues of the herbicide glyphosate have been found in lettuce, carrots, barley, wheat, and rye, in some cases up to a year after the soil was treated. The companies whose food products contain these residues do not have to reveal that to consumers, based on a 1995 case in which the court ruled that dairies using bovine growth hormones in the production of milk did not have to label the milk with that information. The courts also concluded that corporations have the Fourth Amendment right to privacy protection, and therefore must never be subjected to surprise inspections for safety hazards or other malfeasance. A 1978 decision prohibited inspectors of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, from conducting warrantless searches of business premises. The court has ruled that corporations have the Fifth Amendment right to be compensated for future profits lost if government tries to restrict their activities, even if those restrictions are needed to protect the health, safety, or welfare of the public. It can become financially impossible to prevent a business from damaging the environment if the local or state government has to pay the business the anticipated profits it could have realized were it allowed to proceed unregulated. The court has decreed that corporations are to be treated as persons and are entitled to equal protection of the laws under the 14th Amendment. As a result, local and state governments are prohibited from enacting laws which favor locally owned businesses and family farms over wealthy multinational corporations. Moreover, the court has established that corporations are not bound by state laws intended to protect the health, safety, or welfare of its residents. A corporation is basically a group of persons working to accomplish a purpose and is treated as a single entity in order to own property and to sue or be sued in a court of law. At one time, corporations were chartered for a limited time and were restricted to working to achieve a specific goal in the public interest. Today, corporations can live forever and may be created solely to make a profit for their shareholders. As the power of corporations has grown over the years, they have increasingly taken charge of producing and distributing food, water, utilities, education, healthcare, and other elements of human life. Having the sole purpose of making a profit for their shareholders while ignoring the welfare of their employees, customers, and the communities in which they're situated, they make a mockery of democracy and threaten our very existence. Incorporation can be a useful tool to organize society, but it only works for our benefit as long as corporate power is subordinate and accountable to a democratic state. To achieve that subordination and accountability, a 28th Amendment to the Constitution is required. Move to Amend is a national, nonpartisan coalition of citizens and organizations working together to ratify such an amendment and thereby make our government accountable to the people, not just to the moneyed interests. Visit movetoamend.org and read about our We the People Amendment. If you agree with us, sign our petition, please, and join us to support this cause.
So, as I was saying in the beginning, we're at some trying times, right? And we truly believe that abolishing corporate rule and corporate constitutional rights is imperative to thwarting the rising authoritarianism and fascism that we're seeing in our government. I want to ask ask how many folks, maybe a show of hands, how many folks knew about corporate constitutional rights prior to this? Okay, so I probably should have asked beforehand because there's no reason to go through all of the things that you already know. Let me ask this: how does it make you feel knowing that every time you see like another law that says a woman can't have a right to privacy or a woman can't have a right to bodily autonomy, and the Supreme Court, handing out constitutional rights to corporations? I guess maybe that's a good question. How does that kind of thing make you feel as a sovereign citizen of the United States?
You're asking if we know about both of those things, not necessarily connected, but the contrast between them?
Yeah.
It's bizarre. I mean, corporations are basically the people who run the corporations or own the corporations. So it's bizarre, technically they're entities, but they're actually people doing it.
Never corporation really also ruled that a corporation's main objective and purpose for being is to make money, right?
Right.
So, it limits their liability. It ExxonMobil, for example, there's people who work for ExxonMobil, and those individuals have constitutional protections. But ExxonMobil is not, and I'm using this as an example that we can go on for many of them, but they are not, it is not a person. It's a multinational corporation.
Harvard Business School did not even start teaching ethics until the 1980s.
Yep.
The purpose of the corporation is to make profit for the shareholders, and they don't have to think about ethical behavior in any way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. Our political justice director, he went to law school with the sole purpose of, he found out about Citizens United. He was furious. He wanted to see what he could do to make a difference. He went to law school. When they got to that chapter, they skipped it. So even in law school, you don't find out about it until you start practicing. Yes, Paula?
So one of the other things a corporation does is protect the people in the corporation from liability. And so it was shocking to me to learn as I was driving across New Mexico and Arizona a dozen years ago. And I had attended a conference that said, if you are driving across New Mexico and Arizona, please notice the abandoned uranium mines that you can see from the road. And what the game was that they would put a separate corporation for each mine. And then when they had ruined the land, the corporation quit and there was no liability for cleaning up. That is another thing that corporations do, is protect the people who found them. It's not just to make money.
Absolutely. To limit liability and responsibility. Pacific Oil and Gas. What is the electric company there that was responsible for many of the wildfires, but specifically wiped out Paradise and killed people? Their negligence is responsible for homicide and destroying people's homes and lives, and they were slapped on the wrist with a small fine, right? Their charter wasn't revoked. There is a campaign in Ohio, and I think we talked about this on that call you were on, Paula. In Ohio, the electric company there admitted to the largest fraud, pled guilty to the largest fraud in Ohio history, and they got a small fine, not even, just a portion of what their subsidies are. So what are we doing? We do feel like it's imperative to pass the We the People Amendment, but what happens after that? We all know that if you don't have the political will, the grassroots movement building behind you, then it'll sit in a dustbin. We have to have the kind of education and organizing is essential to getting the amendment passed. So recently, like I said, the Women's International League of Peace and Freedom, they were early supporters of Move to Amend and the We the People Amendment. We've kind of morphed from, just having folks endorse the We the People Amendment. Take Veterans for Peace, for example. They recognize that they're never going to achieve the kind of peace that they want, that, of the vision that they have, until we end these insane concepts of corporate personhood and a corporation's money being a form of free speech that can be given without limits in our election. So they've taken us a step further, and they've made passing the We the People Amendment part of their strategic plan. Mike Ferner, he's been a longtime supporter of Move to Amend as well. He and the rest of Veterans for Peace, the Peace and Justice Working Group, has made it part of, like I said, their strategic plan. Because like he said, we've been going after the arsonists for decades and have gotten no traction, or, fighting fires for decades and have not went after the arsonists. And he recognizes and understands that this is where, the arsonists lie, in these insane doctrines of corporate personhood and corporate constitutional rights. So that's one of the reasons I was excited to come and talk to you all about this, because you're in a unique position to see the connections between war and profit, and to recognize that for us to have sustainable peace, not just for the U.S., but across the world, that they're exporting these insane notions into international law now and into space law. So, these these crazy notions aren't just they're not just spreading out past our borders internationally, but even, space law and where we're at now. We saw the writing on the wall. the folks that formed Move to Amend knew what was about to happen when they kicked the floodgates open during the Citizens United decision and every subsequent decision that's happened, that this marriage between corporations and our government and them working arm in arm, completely erasing that veneer of democracy. And so we're not surprised where we're at, and we already knew that this was coming. We've been yelling it from the tops of the mountains for over 10 years now, that this is going to have devastating effects, and it's continued to do so. So I guess one of my asks for y'all are y'all ready to start doing this work too, to getting to the arsonists, and you're already building the movement and already working in such strategic ways for not only equal and equitable rights, but for peace. So my ask to you is, are y'all interested in becoming an endorsing organization to endorse the work that we're doing to pass the We the People Amendment? We have a multifaceted strategic plan. We're working at the local, state, and federal levels to get this passed. There's different ways in doing that. First, building coalitions, building strong relationships within the movement, within the peace movement, the environmental movements, recognizing that all of our struggles for justice are intricately connected. And also recognizing that the powers that be, the corporate powers that be, are into separating and dividing, and not that we don't need to fight all these fires, because we do, or they'll rage out of control, but at the same time we need to work towards systemic solutions, which we think the We the People Amendment is. Move to Amend is the only organization that's working on both of those elements. Not just money in politics, which is super important, but also those corporate constitutional rights. And none of those will have any power unless we together mobilize and organize to demand that we're not taking any steps backwards. We've every progressive step that we have taken has been hard fought, and we are not going to allow it to be washed away with an executive order or gerrymandered election. So currently, the We the People Amendment is in the House, the 119th Congress, as HJR 54. It was introduced by Representative Pramila Jayapal out of Washington. It was introduced with 28 original co-sponsors, which is the largest amount we've had thus far. We have to reintroduce, right? This isn't a marathon. I mean, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. We have to continue to build on the momentum and the organizing from, the day before. This isn't going to happen overnight, but we do believe that the particular regime that's in office right now, and we do recognize that that this is a systemic problem, right? This isn't a right or a left problem. This is a corporate greed problem. This is a imbalance of power problem. This is a big money in our politics problem. And it's certainly that a corporation is not a person problem. So let me open it up for questions. Anything in here piquing your interest? Anything that I can delve into more on any of the things I've brought up, or just any thoughts that you might have that you want to share?
So I have a question. So this HJR, what does HJR stand for?
House Joint Resolution.
House Joint Resolution. Thank you. I'm not current on the lingo, but so this has been introduced in this particular Congress, 119th Congress, whatever it's called. And what is the role of an individual in this? I mean, what is the action that we as individuals can take, especially if our representatives are not listening to us as their constituents? What's our role?
Well, if they're not listening to us, then we mobilize and we get louder, right? We definitely get louder until they can't close their ears or their eyes to what is right in front of them. Who is your representative?
My representative is Sam Liccardo, but other people in this meeting have Zoe Lofgren and maybe Ro Khanna, and I don't know who else. San Jose's Silicon Valley's a big area. Did I catch everybody's those three basically?
I have Ro Khanna as my representative. He has a lot of local town halls where you can show up and probably have a minute or so to speak on different issues. Now, Ro, I follow him pretty closely. He does not talk about Move to Amend or the people's this new amendment. I noticed it was from February. I looked at your website, and one of the things we can do very easily is to sign up in support of that Move to Amend legislation. But to speak to your representative like Ro Khanna, you can go to the town halls or just send him a note saying, I'm interested in doing something about move corporate personhood. And, WILPF used to be this used to be a big topic with us. And I really appreciate your coming here today, Jennie, because you're updating us on something that was really a major part of our organization. And I haven't really heard anything much since then, so I'm glad to get the updates.
So just to let you know, Ro Khanna is one of our original co-sponsors. So they came on before it was introduced. Just to clarify that. Currently, we have Representative Chu Vargas Carbajal. I don't want to mispronounce their name. Salud Carbajal out of California's 24th district. Ro Khanna and Jimmy Panetta. California, we formed in Humboldt County. We came in under the banner of Democracy Unlimited of Humboldt County when we formed the Move to Amend Education Fund. Since that time, we've expanded into also having a C4 so that we could introduce and promote the We the People Amendment once it was written. That is one way. A great start, if you haven't yet, please sign the petition. And that's at movetoamend.org /motion, MOTION. If your rep hasn't come on yet, then let me know if you're ready to, reach out to them. I could get all the tools and resources that you need to connect with them, to reach out to other folks in your district, to bring them on board for that conversation. We're working with other coalition members within the state of California to pass a state statute that would get foreign money out of California elections. Minnesota passed one recently, though, but it was overturned for the same reasons, because of corporate constitutional rights, which is why the only thing that can override a Supreme Court decision is a constitutional amendment. We think this is a real, for lack of a better term, I don't want to say this current crisis, this is a triggering moment, right? And when we are in an existential crisis, then it lends itself the opportunity for big change, for substantial change. And we feel like we're at that moment now. WILPF has been instrumental in California, San Jose, throughout the United States, like I said, in supporting this work. It was Jan Edwards who first put together the corporate constitutional rights timeline. We wouldn't be where we were where we are in this discussion or in building the kind of movement we have if WILPF was not involved. So, you know, thank
So,
you all for that.
So Jennie, you said one of the things we can do is work to pass a state statute. And then in your next sentence, you said, which some state, and I didn't catch who that was, did, and then it was overturned. So why would we work for a state statute if it's going to be overturned by the Supreme Court because of these very corporate personhood? That's the way things are interpreted.
Right. So a state statute, and we kind of felt like that was going, but using that again as an educational tool. So I'm not sure if the California Coalition is how they're going to move forward on it, because the Minnesota one was just overturned. So that's why I was like pulling it back. Then again, but we kind of knew this already, because the Supreme Court and the higher courts continue because of this insane notion of that a corporation is a person. But a lot of people feel and thought that there was already laws on the books to prevent foreign influence in our elections. But again, Citizens United changed all of that. So in California, they were trying to close that loophole. And again, the Minnesota decision just came down. So it's moved. The only way is a constitutional amendment that makes clear that they're not people, and that their money's not, that its money is not speech.
Does any pressure on corporations make a difference? We're sitting here in Silicon Valley, home of many, many corporations with great value. Does that make any impact?
Although, I mean, if they were to, get ALEC to write some model legislation in our favor, but no, corporations, we ultimately hold the power. We are the ones, we the people have to do it. And we have to demand that our government be responsive. So no, and they're not going to give up any of that power, those privileges, those rights anyway, but they should be subordinate to the people power 100%, and held responsible for their actions, or at least held responsible for their actions like an individual would be.
I have always felt that what we have as individuals is the power of the purse. And many people are looking at things that businesses they have used and really enjoyed using, like Amazon and the Teslas and Apple Computer. And these corporate people who represent these corporations are siding with an administration that is just destroying individual benefits that we earned, like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. And, I always tell people that, well, don't support Amazon. Don't buy a Tesla. Don't, this is where the power of the purse works. But it's really hard to change people's habits. My daughter loves buying stuff on Amazon. So what, whatever I say, I'm not sure she's going to change her ways for anybody.
So Amazon makes most of its money on web hosting. The people you're hurting if you don't support the small business owners who are selling through Amazon. That's who's losing money. Amazon is not losing money if you boycott Amazon. It's a wonderful thing to feel like you're to be doing something, but that is not the power of the purse. We have 80 billionaires in Santa Clara County. My money, I'm a retired librarian. I am never going to be a tech bro. I'm never going to be a billionaire. And so the power of my purse compared to the power of the 80 billionaires in our county is insignificant. And so I do try to buy local and the other things that we're suggesting, but I wouldn't beat your daughter up over buying things from Amazon because retail is not where they make their money.
And the thing is, I'm not anti-corporation, I'm anti-corporate rule, you know. I don't have a problem with a corporation making money, but I do want them to pay their fair share of taxes.
Absolutely.
I want them to be held accountable if they cause harm to communities. I don't want their rights to supersede my rights or my neighbor's rights. So what we're talking about here, and I boycotting, like you said, the power of the purse. I quit shopping at Walmart 15 years ago. I didn't hurt their business any. Um, Now, if enough people did, I did spend quite a bit of money at Walmart at one time, and I'll never step foot in there again. I'll be honest with you, but and I don't stop at a BP gas station, So I have those little acts of rebellion every day that I do, deciding where my money goes. I definitely go to buy local whenever possible. And I haven't missed those corporations one little bit. But what I want is a democracy, or I want a government that's responsive to us, to we the people. And like you said, when your reps aren't listening to you or when they're not hearing you, that's because they're spending 70% of their time trying to make money, trying to get donations so that they can run for office again. And very few people can make it without that corporate funding, right? We have that problem at Move to Amend as far as funding. We're a grassroots organization, all volunteer organization that receives no corporate funding. We flat refuse to accept any corporate funding. We have no billionaires supporting our work. These are all grassroots, sometimes $3, sometimes, $300, but it's individual people who have worked hard for their money that are donating to us. So, we can't compete with the BPs and Silicon Valley, as you said, with our purse. Our purses are getting smaller and smaller, while their purses are getting bigger and bigger. So, I'm not anti-corporate in that sense. Yes, we have to change culture. And that's part of it. That buy local campaign is wonderful. Instead of on Black Fridays, I always go out into nature, right? Refuse to spend a dime. And there's some small actions that have been happening recently, that are, don't spend any money here on this day, or don't spend any money there. And that's good for us to get on the same page with. But for systemic change, we have to change the laws, because the laws are the power, right? That we have in America, in the land of the free, we have war for profit, healthcare for profit, prison for profit. All of these industrial complexes, housing. They just passed that Grant Pass decision. The Supreme Court just handed down, criminalizing homelessness. With the power of the pen, they just opened up. There was a moratorium on for-profit federal prison incarceration facilities. That all ended 2 weeks ago. We have to demand in a unified voice that we are not going to allow this. And we feel like, the We the People Amendment isn't the cure-all for everything, but it is a fabulous tool to engage, to educate, to mobilize around, but it's going to take us working together after the amendment is passed. We've been waiting 100 years for the Equal Rights Amendment, 100 years, the first time it was introduced. It should be an amendment now. We even say we're looking to pass the 29th Amendment, because in our hearts and minds, the 28th Amendment is the Equal Rights Amendment. So first we need equal rights. Right now, it's unequal rights when corporations have the power. I see you, Paula, and then Essie, or we want to give Essie a chance to go first since we haven't heard from you?
Oh, sorry. I just noticed that when you said I can only not go to Walmart, one person doesn't make a difference. We here in San Diego have started mobilizing, and we are gathering at Tesla offices, we are gathering at the Chevron stations, and we go to these places and people notice us, and they've stopped coming to the chevrons, the ones we go to. First, we make sure it's not a person who's being affected, a small bird who has bought the franchise. We want to make sure it's the owner of the. First, we research that, and then we go and stand there. It makes a difference. People get aware. Oh, Chevron is doing this, sending to kill children in some other country. No. So we are making a difference by mobilizing, not one person not buying this or that, but mobilizing together with the groups. And we have groups. We have San Diego activist groups. Sorry, I'm interrupting you, but this is our movement. It works. We go to different Chevron stations that are owned by the owned by the person, not given out to some poor guy who's trying to make money. And then we go to Tesla's. We really made a difference. Tesla made a difference. I've heard that.
Tesla, yeah, the actions there are amazing. Yeah. And yes, Essie, I'm not saying that our protests aren't making a difference. They do. And, I sat in front of a BP for 2 years. I covered the oil spill. That's kind of how I came into this. I was a multimedia journalist here in Florida, in the Panhandle. And when the BP oil spill happened, I kind of went into a dark spot. I was military. I was raised in the military. So I kind of always knew about the military industrial complex, and every time anything that happened in the world that was going to affect my mother and my father, they were both active duty military members. I'm a conscientious objector. But there's nothing more powerful than being in the streets with, our brothers and sisters who our hearts all beating as one and all in that same direction. That is so powerful and so important. But
thank you. Answered my question. Thank you.
Yes, I definitely believe that that's important. And really the only time we've ever gotten change is by doing that, by coming together, mobilizing, engaging, and activating and agitating and demanding that we be heard. So yeah, Essie, I'm with you 100%. 100%.
Thank you.
Yes, Paula?
So where can we find the text of the HJR 54? Is it on the Move to Amend site? Is it in language we would understand?
Absolutely. That's the thing. This isn't a big wordy mouthful. We very clear. This wasn't written by a bunch of legalese. We did have some constitutional law experts take a look at it, and we continue to do that because just like all laws, it's a living document, but it has two main provisions. Number one, artificial entities such as corporations do not have constitutional rights. The rights and privileges protected and extended by the Constitution of the United States are rights and privileges of natural persons only. An artificial entity such as a corporation, limited liability company, or another entity established by law of any state, the United States or a foreign state, shall have no rights under the Constitution and are subject to regulation by the people through federal, state, and local laws. The privilege of an artificial entity shall be determined by the people through federal, state, or local laws and shall not be construed to be inherent or inalienable rights. Their privileges. That's number one. That's the whole provision for number one. And then number 2 is federal, state, and local government shall regulate, limit, or prohibit contributions and expenditures, including a candidate's own contributions and expenditures, to ensure that all citizens, regardless of their economic status, have access to the political process, and that no person gains as a result of that person's money substantially more access or ability to influence in any way an election of any candidate for public office or any ballot measures. And federal, state, and local governments shall require that any permissible contribution and expenditure be publicly disclosed, and that the judiciary shall not construe the spending of money to influence election to be speech under the First Amendment. That's section 2. That's it. That's the nuts and bolts of it. There is a third section. It one-liner: this amendment shall not be construed to abridge the rights secured by the Constitution of the United States of the freedom of the press. That's already protected under the First Amendment, right? Don't think it's necessary, but it was debated in the halls of government, and so it was added, and we're okay with that. You can find the amendment at movetoamend.org/amendment. There's also a link there that will take you to the government website that'll have the list of representatives that have come on as co-sponsors and the official language on the .gov website. But that's it. 2 simple provisions. We don't want the issue to be clouded. One of the things that are real important in all of this, there are other amendments out there that, for example, want to limit money in our elections, but it says the federal, state, and local government may regulate. And that, in legal terms, means, do it, don't do it, it doesn't matter. This makes it mandated that they shall regulate.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing the words, even though it was a bit of legalese, but I understand. Now, there has been a debate as to, you said early on, there was no definition of personhood in the original Constitution. And I think I heard in your amendment, natural person? What was it called?
Natural person.
Natural person. Is that defined closely enough? I mean, we're sitting here in the center of all kinds of technology that who knows where it's going to go.
That's a very good point. We've had a discussion internally about what's a natural person, what's a person, what defines a person, and we're not trying to define that. What we do know is what is not a person. And that's why it says an artificial entity such as a corporation, limited liability. So, natural persons is that term to define in legalese term, a natural person is a human being. What is not a person, and we know should not have inalienable or inherent rights, such as that we have as we the people, are unions, nonprofits, for-profit entities. These are, legal fictions created by the state and should be regulated under the direction of we the people.
So there's no hope of going back to when corporations were set up, which was they had a limited life. There's no hope of going back there, is there?
After the We the People Amendment is passed, once we make clear that they're not corporations, then we can create the laws that make sense to the people. And, we have one of the oldest constitutions. Everybody else has a way to renew their constitution to, the world is not stagnant. Like you mentioned, we have artificial entities now. We have AI. We have so much technology and development, right? We have drones. We have what happened the day after elections. That was that robot dog that they're using in military scenarios. This is a real thing. This past weekend, money is speech. And $1 million a plate for a sitting president that came into office 2 months ago and already having $1 million a plate fundraiser. twice. It's the second one since he came into office. This is undue access to our decision makers. And we believe that, this isn't going to solve all our problems. But once we've dealt with this, once we have uprooted these insane notions that have entrenched the power into the hands of a few, then the people can come together and to really get some traction on all these other justice issues that matter to us. So, this isn't, again, this is a piece of the puzzle, but this piece of the puzzle is integral and that's why I'm so involved with Move to Amend. And, I'm now with the national team, but I volunteered with them for years because when I found out about them after learning about Citizens United and other decisions, this is the only work that gets to the root, totally at the root. We know we have a problem. It's everywhere. It's in every social, economic, environmental justice problem we deal with, right? Issue that we care about. Our environment, we're facing species annihilation. Our life depends on it. And what does that depend on? It depends on life, living things. Right now in Florida, we're working on an amendment to our state constitution to include the protection, the right to clean water. So water rights. I think we should have those rights. That is an inherent right? The protection of our water, our air, our living planet. But we feel like this is a first crucial step to getting to that, to getting to a fair economic system, a fair environmental protection organization. The oil companies and gas and electric companies, they derive their power here, not just with their money. I mean, their money's a huge part of it, right? They have more money than many countries on this planet. But how can we get to a more equitable place and truly believe that this gets to the root of that problem?
Thank you, Jennie. It's getting, if you're in Florida.
We're over. I'm sorry.
If you're in Florida, it's 11:17. I mean, it's just 8:17 for us here in California. We try to wind up by 8:30, but I'm just really aware. Whoa, you're in Florida. So first of all, I want to give you a big, our wave of applause. Thank you. I really appreciate that you joined us. That it's so late.
Thanks for having me.
It's so late where you are, but I also want to ask. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm willing to do some things and to go onto the Move to Amend site and figure out, what I can do. Is anybody else willing to do that after hearing this? Anybody else willing to step up and do that? So that's where asking, have you made a difference? That's what we need to think about in terms of you came, you talked to us, and I've learned a lot. And it's now you've got some more of us, who are thinking about who a person is as we sit here in Silicon Valley. Maybe we could say a person you're not a natural person if you have over $1 billion in wealth, but I won't say that.
Yeah, that's just not natural, is it? It's totally not natural. Well, thank you all so much for having me here. I have a great deal of respect for all the work that you're doing, and not just the feminist in me, but the peace-loving person that I am. So please keep up the great work. I look forward to working with you on this and finding a true peace and solidarity in the works that we're doing. It is intricately connected, and I'm just really honored to be here. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. We're not quite done because our meetings end with announcements and 2 quick Raging Granny songs. So we're not done with the grannies. We're not done. But first of all,
I love that.
Oh dear, what can the matter be? Big money is killing democracy. We're fed up with fat cats' hypocrisy. We need to move to amend. The Supreme Court decided that big corporations can donate to candidates all through our nation. Elections now are an abomination, so we need to move to amend. Oh dear, what can the matter be? Big money is killing democracy. We're fed up with the fat cat's hypocrisy. We need to move to amend. The candidates have to take money that's dirty, or they can't buy ads on the news at 6:30. Now folks don't have access to news that is worthy, so we need to move to amend. Oh dear, what can the matter be? Big money is killing democracy. We're fed up with the fat cat's hypocrisy. We need to move to amend. Corporations back candidates who help the wealthy, while poor people cannot afford to stay healthy. Our tax money's wasted on bombs that are stealthy, so we need to move to amend. So, oh dear, what can the matter be? Big money is killing democracy. We're fed up with the fat cat's hypocrisy. We need to move to amend. There can beat us black and blue. Throw our books in a dumpster too. They can jail the people, but not the truth. Today we say no more. Oh dear, what can the matter be? Big money is killing democracy. We're fed up with the fat cat's hypocrisy. We need to move to amend.
Oh, thank you, Shirley. Thank you, thank you. All right, we know the last one, and it's got 5 stanzas. Who's wanting to lead this one? It's when we make peace. Okay, anybody stepping up?
When we make peace instead of war. When we make peace instead of war. How I want to be in that number. When we make peace instead of war. When Congress speaks for you and me. When Congress speaks for you and me. How I want to be in that number. When Congress speaks for you and me. When power resides with all the people. When power resides with all the people. How I want to be in that number. When power resides with all the people. When corporate rule is history. When corporate rule is history. How I want to be in that number. When corporate rule is history. When we make peace instead of war. When we make peace instead of war. How I want to be in that number. When we make peace instead of war.
That was Barbie.
Oh, you are Barb?
So that was our matriarch of 95 years singing.
Oh my God, you're still going strong, Barbie.
Yes, good for you, Barbie. And I think that was recorded.
Nice, beautiful, Barbie.
All right. Well, that's our WILF meeting. I will